Hey guys, and welcome to a new episode of She Gets It Done. I'm Sanne, and this is Toni. Today we're going to talk about Littermate syndrome. What is it? Why does it happen? Who does it happen to? What's the deal with it?
Yes, it's a pretty important topic. I don't come across it as often as other cases, but I have seen like the odd case, and I've also seen some things on Facebook where they have things where the puppies are flying together and now they're fighting. So Littermate syndrome is essentially where you get two puppies from the same litter or two puppies very close in age together. And what happens is they grow up together and they become either very obsessed with each other that they can't exist without each other, or they can turn into
Fight club.
Yeah. And it's quite nasty. It's not something that we recommend. So a lot of people get, I think we touched on it in another episode, well, the last episode, where I think people get them because they want their puppy to have a friend growing up, or they want their puppy to have company all day, or they just want to get the puppy stage out of the way with two dogs.
I think also what happens is dodgy rescues. They're like, oh, but if you don't, why don't you adopt two? Because otherwise the one will be all by itself. I've heard those stories, and also dodgy breeders do the same.
Any breeder that lets you take two puppies together, I'm like, no. Stay away from that. And just on a basic breeding knowledge level, you should know that you should not be doing that. But then I think that's where it's kind of going into the money making scheme, and then you also have rescues that take on too many dogs, they can't handle it, and then they've literally just got to get the dogs out, and then once they're adopted, it's not their problem anymore.
Exactly.
So it's a topic where we've kind of touched a little bit on it in the past, that we might mainly recommend you get one dog, you work on that dog, you build them up to being a nice solid dog, and then you look into getting another dog. I had an example, it was quite a few years ago, where a lovely lady got two puppies together, and at first it was fine. It was probably a few weeks, like, again, because they're really young then, they don't show any of their personality then, but then they started noticing that one of them was hiding under the bed all the time and was super anxious, and they were just really struggling just with being able to manage two puppies at once. It was just too much for them. And so they ended up making the decision to send back the more confident one, because they found that they would get a home much easier, and then they would just focus on the one that they have. And it's been about 6 years, and the dog is amazing. They made the right decision, and he's very confident in himself. He's a funny dog, he's great, but it could have gone a lot differently had they decided to stick with it.
I never hear that. Every time I get to somewhere that does two puppies, I will advise, are you sure about this? I never get them to get rid of the dogs.
This was before I got into dog training. This was in a different situation, and so they kind of had made that decision themselves, and I think the kids were upset initially, but
of course they're upset.
I had said to them, I think that's the right decision if you're really struggling. So
I do want to say that not every two puppies will get Littermate syndrome. I think most pups probably don't, but is that a risk you want to take?
No. And I think even if bar aside the Littermate syndrome issue, I think the big part is the fact you can't give both your puppies, well, I mean, you could, but I mean, it's going to take a lot of work, especially if you're working 8 hours a day and you're doing your own thing, and if you have kids, all of that kind of stuff. I just don't know how you can physically give your puppy everything they need times 2 to set them up for life.
And I think what we see a lot as trainers is that the puppies get so attached to each other that you as the owner are like on the bottom. They don't really care about you.
No, yeah, exactly.
You know, lots of those owners struggle with engagement and really connecting because the pups have each other. They don't need you. Whereas usually if you get a puppy, it's like 8 weeks old and you're bringing it home for the first time, the pup is going to latch onto you because you're the only one that puppy has.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Whereas with Littermate syndrome, the puppy will latch on to their brother or sister to the point where it can become really unhealthy.
And then when you're just trying to even take them out and about, and you might want to go to a cafe, if your dog can't even focus on you, how are you going to do anything with them? And then you get the other extreme where they have the whole gang up on other dogs, that pack mentality.
Yep.
And often it will be one dog that sparks the other dog. If they're separate, you don't have any issue.
Yep.
But you have that pack mentality, and then you have your reactive dogs because they're both lunging at dogs, or or they can't. Well, yeah, reactivity.
That's it, because they are so used to being together that when a third dog comes in, 3 is a crowd, right?
Yeah.
They're so used to, or they have a very specific play style, and then another dog comes in and it plays differently, and it instantly escalates because they're like, hey, this is not how we play. Or there's jealousy. There's absolutely jealousy in dogs. Like, I don't know if that's scientifically proven or what, but I've seen dogs be jealous. And there is jealousy going on if you have litter mates and a different dog comes in to the pack. I feel like it's either that happens, the 2 pups are really antisocial to other dogs, or they start fighting amongst each other. And that usually happens when they're older. Have you noticed that? I've had a few clients that had dogs that were fine, and then when they're between 2 and 4, they're going to start problems in the house.
Yeah, because they're at their full adult stage they've kind of gone through. Or even like probably peak sexual maturity, maybe, like as they're, know, and they're finding themselves, you can also have that. And then that's a whole another issue in itself.
Yeah, like they start fighting. Like, I know I have 2 clients with pugs, and they fight with each other all the time over absolutely nothing. There's those. I've had the one dog that gave me that scar. That was also Littermate issue, and they just start fighting. They just fight in the house with each other sometimes over resources, sometimes over attention, sometimes over nothing.
And it gets dangerous when you can't predict what the issue is, right? And so from your professional point of view, say you had a client come in, they've got 2 dogs, and say they're a couple of years old, and it is getting quite escalated, quite fighting. Like, what would be your recommendation? Would you recommend separating them at this point, or do you think it's too late and it's just a management point?
Oh, I find that really hard, because the one thing I don't do as a dog trainer is in-home dog fighting.
True.
I hate it. I just hate it. I don't like having to deal with people that have 2 or 3 dogs and the dogs in the house are fighting. I don't want to work with it. I don't feel like I have the experience for it. I will refer you to someone else.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't want to give advice on what I would like. I will probably tell you separate the dogs, but how many people would you know that say, oh, I've had these dogs since they were puppies
and they're 4 years old.
Yeah. I'm going to get rid of one.
Yeah, they probably just lived with it, and now they're just kind of like, well, we want to do everything we can, right? Yeah. Or they'll just continue to live with it.
Or
right?
You might have to do crate rotate or whatever, which is a management solution. But if you want a proper training solution, I'm not the one to answer that question.
Yeah.
That's just, I've done a bit of work with some dogs. I think one of the main problems is that Littermate dogs, they have no personal space often. And especially when they're puppies, the owners think it's cute. And they're like, they're crate trained. They sleep in the same crate together. Please stop doing that.
Don't do that even if they're not Littermates.
Exactly.
Just never do that. Give them their own space.
I always say, like, I love my partner. I love him, and we've been together for 10 years. But there are times that I'm like, don't fucking touch me right now. Right? I don't want to be touched.
I need my own space.
I have stomach cramps. I need my own space. I'm grumpy. Whatever it is, leave me alone. Doesn't mean I don't love you, but right now, you need to leave me alone.
Yeah.
And I feel like with Littermate dogs especially, then they're sleeping together, they're walking together, they're sleeping together during the day, we're in the crate together, we're eating together, everything is together. And I think, especially for the older dogs, they suddenly reach that point where they're like, fuck, I don't actually enjoy this. I never get to do something for me. It's always together. And I wonder, I don't know, I don't have enough knowledge about this, if that's a reason why shit hits the fan sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine it. Like, I can imagine dogs feel emotions like us, right? So they got to feel levels of frustration and just
Totally.
getting over it. Especially if it's even a younger dog that's just constantly in their face. Like, I can just imagine that would just be so irritating.
Yeah.
So that's actually one thing that you pointed out with the crates. So I think what would be really important for us to talk about is, so say someone has just started listening to the podcast, but unfortunately
You already have
that
the dogs.
we already have this situation going on.
It is what it is. Don't feel bad about it.
You didn't know.
That's it.
You were doing the best with the knowledge that you had. So why don't we give some advice on what we think would be the best steps to try and avoid Littermate syndrome? So you already touched on it, is giving space. So definitely giving them their own area that they can go and take themselves, and probably making a conscious effort of separating them during the day. Yeah, forced separation.
Absolutely. That sounds horrible how I say that, forced, but if you give dogs the chance, especially when they're that young, they're not going to separate each other. So you have to physically just... And it doesn't mean one is in the one end of the house and the other is in the other. It could just be like 2 crates next to each other.
But it's their own space.
Exactly.
And then also just making time, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes a day, put one in the crate and take one out and just do some trick training with them.
That's it.
Just something small like that. It doesn't need to be hours. A lot of people think, oh, training, it has to be an hour each dog. That's completely incorrect. We've touched on this quite a few times.
Yeah.
Training can be as short as 5 or 10 minutes. You could do it once a day if you've only got once a day, or you could do it twice a day, morning, night. It would be awesome. But if you don't, even just once a day, and you're just making time for you and that specific dog.
So you also can build a bond with them separately, and they get a break from the other dog.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they can learn. Again, right? Learning happens differently. Some dogs are fast learners and other dogs are slow learners. And some dogs are introverts and others are extroverts. And you always see that if you train 2 dogs at the same time, one is the fast one and will constantly try to snatch the treats away. Or they're like pushy. They're like, look, I'm doing it. One is the teacher's pet.
Yeah.
Right? And then the other one will go like, well, whatever. That one is doing it. Why would I do it?
Exactly.
So it's good to give him that one-on-one time to feel special with you, I suppose.
Yes, I agree. And then you also have like this fast learner and you're the slow learner, but you also, your dogs have their own strengths. So like my dog Nova can do a lot, can pick up very quickly a lot of tasks, but because she's so food driven, she could never hold something because holding something would mean overriding staring at the treat. That's too much for her. I've tried this. It's just not worth it. But there's a lot of trick training she can do. Whereas my other dog, Ellie, who's the more introverted one, she's very intelligent. And I taught her to open a cupboard door, grab me a Marmite jar and bring it to me.
Nice.
And she picked that up really, really quickly. However, Nova can pick up a lot of trick training quite quickly because she's very driven to push for food, whereas Ellie will be like, oh yeah, I'll like take it or leave it.
Yeah.
So it's also finding what's your individual dog's strengths, because you might just teach them completely different things.
Absolutely.
And then you're not having to teach the same thing over and over again. Teach them different things.
Which
and they've
is
got
good
their
for
own
your own
thing.
motivation.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think that's really important. Taking them for a walk separately is really important. So you don't get any barking at other dogs. You can really work on your loose leash walking and building on confidence on their own, because there's always one dog that's more secure than the other, and then the other one will never learn that, hey, I can do this. I don't need you to help me through that. Like, sometimes it's good, but not all the time.
Yeah.
I think. And if you think like, oh, that sounds really stupid, I don't want to do any of that, just imagine that one of your dogs gets sick and ends up at the vet overnight. That's what I tell all my clients with 2 dogs or with littermates or whatever. What are you going to do with the dog that's not at the vet? Do you really want to have to worry about 2 dogs because one of them is at the vet and the other is freaking out because they don't have the other dog there and they're destructive or freaking, like, do you really want that? No. So work on it when you don't need it.
Now, same with my dog. So my newest dog got quite attached to Nova, my older dog, but she's more reactive, so she's quite selective with the dogs that we that we take her out with, and that's fine. My other dog is quite social, so she'll come out on pack walks with me, but my other dog will stay home with my partner. And at first she didn't like that, but then she just got used to it. And then I made a habit. So we've got a family member on the same property in a different house. I will take Nova away and we'll go down there. She didn't like that at first, and now she doesn't care.
Yeah.
Because I made them get used to being taken away and they're not there all the time. So even Nova might be on the same property, but she's not in the same house.
That's it.
Yeah.
Don't always have to do what the dog likes.
No.
Sometimes you have to do things the dog doesn't like.
Teach your dog to have FOMO.
Yes. And to deal with the FOMO.
Yeah, deal with the FOMO, that you're not always going to be involved in everything. But those would probably be the best tips to start with, is that you really need to focus on making time to build your relationship with your dog outside of your other dog.
Yeah.
And that you do, and it can be hard, especially with like walking dogs together, finding 2 separate times to walk your dogs.
But that's why you shouldn't take 2 dogs at the same time. If you don't want to commit to that,
don't do it.
Then don't do it. Because that's, like, it doesn't matter which dog trainer you look for, if it's me, Toni, whoever, all of us will most probably say you need to start separating your dogs and doing the training separately.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't matter who.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be some trainers that say, no, it's fine, but then I question their skills.
Yeah. Just try and build their own life outside of the other dog's life. Like, they need their own things. It's just like kids have their own friends. They might be siblings, they might even be twins, but they've got their own friends, they've got their own interests.
That's it.
They go out and do their own things. It's exactly the same.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, I think that's it on Littermate syndrome. Let us know if you have 2 dogs at the same time, or have you got any experience with Littermate syndrome, or do you think everything we say is bullshit? Let us know in the comments.
Have an argument with us if you really think that we're wrong.
Alright.
But don't forget to like and subscribe though.
That's it.
So you can have more arguments with us later.
That's it. Or you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Does Spotify do reviews?
Yes, they do.
Oh, you can leave one there as well.